The dancing obviously was utterly amazing. Really raised the roof with that. But we thought after all that high energy dancing it'd be nice to come together and just talk a little bit about the Croft. And I thought there was nobody better that could come along and talk about Crofting and what the Croft means, what Crofting actually means, not in the city but out on an actual croft. And so I want to give a really warm welcome to Iain MacKinnon from the Crofting Federation. And Iain's got some really interesting stuff to talk to you about, man. So I'm not going to keep you any longer with my rabbit on, and I'll pass you over to Iain.
Daily voor Croft lief, dat would be barach la marshal tappers now. So good afternoon, Crofters of Leith. And I think thank you. And I think this is an actual croft. I want to pick you up on that. This is an actual croft because it's got people working the land on it. And I'm delighted and feel honoured to be along with you today on this second Harvest Festival of the Leith Community Croft. And may there be many more days like this in the future where you gather to celebrate the fruits of the earth's great turning. And I'd like to thank Evie for inviting me to participate. Evie asked me to discuss what I might share today, and she suggested I talk about Crofting culture, and also to talk about what land means for people and for communities, how Crofting is relevant in a city context, and also how what's happening in Leith fits with wider issues. And I've taken wider issues to be quite broad. I remember when I met Evie at an event that was being held by Common Good Food, which is an Edinburgh-based organisation trying to support relocalisation of agriculture and food production. They held an event at the Edinburgh Food Festival, and Iain was talking about how these wider issues can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. And I think those feelings of being overwhelmed are related to the way that we use land and think of land as a planetary community. And there are some of those bigger issues have, so the way that we think of, the way that we use land and exploit land in terms of overusing nature, depleting nature's ability to regenerate her regenerative capacities, and creating conditions of scarcity. And though that way of working the land, that way of thinking about land, of treating land, comes with consequences which are social and are ecological and are human. And some of the social consequences are that because we create conditions of scarcity, we have wars over resources, and with those wars come violence and bloodshed and people seeking refuge, which is what we've been seeing and sort of still seeing in the Middle East at the moment, and then coming closer to home. And the ecological consequences include what some people call the death of nature, the loss of species and the diversity of life on Earth permanently, and the pollution of the land and of air and of waterways, the acidification of oceans, which is a real ecological threat, and climate change. And then there are personal consequences, which is our recognition that our ways of living and our lifestyles are implicated in those in the wider issues that we see, and that can lead to feelings of anger and of grief and of despair. which can feel overwhelming at times. And I know I've said this in the past, but one of the things that helps me in those times is to realise that we're not alone. That we have guides from the past and we have colleagues in the present. And for me, some of the guides are our Crofting ancestors who, in the 19th century, were also facing overwhelming odds in terms of their struggle to remain on their land. And they didn't think of themselves as crofters at that time. That was a word that wasn't in our language. We were the Tua. And the Tua is a word that's sometimes translated as tribe, but it has a particular meaning. It means both the people that live in a place, that inhabit a place, and also the place itself. It means both those things. And so the people then were being forced from the land or marginalised on the land, and against them there was the landlords who were backed up by property as a law, as an ideology, and the landlords were also backed up by the government. And at that time the government wasn't just the British government, Britain was an imperial power, so it was a huge state infrastructure, which also had military force. And on Skye in the 1880s there were the deployment of Royal Marines and gunboats patrolling the waters around Skye to try to stop the risings. But in spite of all these forces, people gathered together in small groups and then in larger groups because they felt that something was wrong, that something that was happening on the land wasn't right. And they discussed and they decided that they would take action based on that feeling that they had, that there was another way that things could be different. And that is, they took action for the responsibility for their future. And it was from that Crofting law and Crofting land tenure was created. And that's why Crofting tenure exists today, because people took action in that way. And so one of the questions I'm coming here with, because I'm keen to find out more, part of the reasons I came up here was I was following my nose. I was wanting to know, why is there a Croft in Leith? Why is that name? Why call it Croft? Did people, was it based on people's feelings that things could be different in some way, things could be better? Did people come together to have discussions, were there gatherings, discussions in groups, and then a decision to act on behalf of this place and of the people of this place? Because if that's what happened, it seems to me that this belongs very much in the Crofting tradition. It's very much part of that longer story that has existed in Scotland and beyond Scotland. And so those are questions conversations I'd like to have after we've finished speaking. And I'd like to return a little to the Tua, this idea of the Tua, because it belongs to a family of words that are all related to one another, all connected to one another. And what the people were fighting for at that time was their duchas. And duchas is a Gaelic word which means, it was used as a land rights claim, but it means it's a feeling, and it's your feeling of belonging to a place and of taking responsibility for a place. And people use that term to fight for the rights. It was being written that they were seeking their duchas, or they were seeking to maintain their duchas. And in this family of words, you can see that the grandmother word, the root word, is a word called do. And do means what is natural or normal to a person. And it also means the land itself. And people are dunya. They're people, one who comes from the land. And as a collective, dunya, people are those who come from the land. And your homeland is your duhi. And your sense of belonging to that homeland is your duchas. So all these words are related to each other, and they form an important part of a Gaelic cosmology, a way of thinking about the world, what the world's for. And that's why that word Tua means both the place and the people who belong to that place. And I grew up quite disconnected with my traditional culture, and I went back as an adult, as someone in my 20s, trying to ask questions, trying to find out more about the place that I come from and the people I belong to. And that sense of people and place together was brought home to me quite powerfully by an old woman I went to speak with. I was asking her about identity and being a Gael. And she said, what you are is your community. You are the people you grow up with, and even more so the place. You might not realise it, you might even reject it, but you're absorbed in it. And I don't think that's something that's specific just to Gaelic culture. I think it's a universal thing. I think people are shaped by the place and the circumstances that they grow up in. And they can also shape that themselves, they can change that themselves. And it seems to me that these same questions and issues arise somewhere like Leith. How does the experience of Leith shape what people are, what people do here? And how can that be different? What does this small croft mean in terms of what it is to experience Leith, what it is to be in Leith? And it seems to me that's not only important now, but it's important for future generations. Because I was hearing, when I was with Ellie outside, that even the croft itself is a place of, you could call it multiple use. There are uses that have been there in the past, and those include drug taking and prostitution, and there are now new uses to that. And how can that space be different? And what can the new use of that space, a place where things can grow, mean for the young people here? What can it give to the young people here? And I think that's something that we've lost a lot of in the Crofting areas in the Highlands. We've lost a lot of that sense of connection of what does this place mean? So I think we're all asking the same questions. It's another way in which I think Crofting extends beyond the Highlands and Islands. And something else, another question I have about Crofting in Edinburgh is this place, Crofting Lee, which isn't too far away from here. I think it's somewhere under Abbey Hill. And that means, Crofting Lee means the croft of the king. And my understanding is that croft was used to feed the king's household at Holyrood Palace. So there you have the old croft of Scotland, which is used to feed one man, one household, one family. And as against Crofting Lee, you have Crofting Dunya or Crofting Quairsham, the new croft of Edinburgh, which is the croft of the people, or the croft of the community. And what can that mean in terms of people gathering together? What's the difference between those ways of doing things? Which is the new way of doing things, the growing way of doing things? I was thinking also of what could I bring from the Isle of Skye, which is the island that I belong to, and the Crofting community I belong to, that might be of use or of relevance here. And one thing that struck me is decision making, and how important and how difficult decision making can be, because conflict is normal. People disagree, and it's how you deal with the conflict that counts. And so days like this, where people gather together and celebrate what has been done together, are really important. And working together. It sounds like you've got a really innovative sharing and management structure on the land. It's just emerging, it's all very new. And people are working closely together. And building those relationships really helps when it comes to making difficult decisions and when it comes to disagreement, because you've broken bread together, you've danced with each other, you look each other in the eyes when you're twirling around. All that requires the building of trust. And so the decision making is really important. And I've been very impressed with the Crofters Agreement, because it deals with many of the issues. That's the copy of it here. Be active. That's one of the principles. And that's one of the big issues we face in Crofting. Many people it's called neglect of land or abandonment of land. And so encouraging people to be active and to find ways to be active is important. Also, absenteeism. People can't be present, finding ways to work with them so people can maybe do other things. We're struggling with that a lot. People have to move away for work in Crofting areas. So can you cover for someone? Would someone take on your piece of land for a while, look after it until you're able to come back? And be flexible with that. One of the problems we've had in the past is our legislation, our equivalent of this, has been very rigid. And it's caused tension within communities and between communities. So the importance there, I think, is to be really talking to one another all the time. If something comes up, be able to share it, have structures in place that these things can be shared. And being out there today, I was just so impressed. It is an actual Crofting, because it's just people working together and building something together as a township, you would call it, or a community as a group. And it's very encouraging. And so the final thing that Edie asked me to talk about was what this means to the Scottish Crofting Federation. Now, I'm a member of the Crofting Federation, but I'm not a representative. I can't say what it is for the Federation. So I spoke to Patrick, who's the director of the Federation, and he gave me a short statement, which I have somewhere here. So this Leith Community Croft statement from the Scottish Crofting Federation. The Scottish Crofting Federation has called on the Scottish Government to create more crofts throughout Scotland. And so from the SCF's perspective, what you're embarking on in Leith is a great example of citizens not waiting for government, but getting on and doing it for ourselves. People taking collective action for a more sustainable agriculture and food production, and for more equitable access to land. This is the same principle that the people of Braes and elsewhere in the Highlands and Islands upheld in the land risings of the 1880s. Without collective action based on this principle, crofting tenure would never have been created in the first place. Your new croft on Leith links, as well as the existence of an old croft and Ree, only a few hundred yards away from you, also raises the important question of who crofting belongs to. We have long believed that crofting is the positive way forward, and that it contains the seeds of a better food and social system, not only for the Highlands and Islands, but for all Scotland. It is very good to see that view being put into action in Scotland's capital. With your trust in the earth, it never let you down. Many blessings on your work. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was really inspiring to hear that. And I suppose it takes me back, because Ellie and I were at the Nourish conference just the other day, and the statement from Patrick, the president of the Crofting Federation, really taps into some of the discussions that were going on in the wider context with Nourish Scotland about the European Union and the 56 states that argue over the policies, and how the CAP, Common Agriculture Policy, is not really fit for purpose in terms of how it is, but how complicated and how difficult it is within the European Union to get some better policies that actually suit people who are living in communities in cities, and how that relates to the wider context of food and the environment. So I think a lot of the stuff that Iain has been talking about today, and why I felt it so relevant for Iain to come and speak, is about just how much empowerment's gone on in Leith with connecting to land and connecting to food, and how that sort of links into a lot of the stuff that Iain was talking about, to do with people standing up for their land and their right to be on the land, and have a connection to their food supply. So that would really inspire them.